Whether we are writing a speech about a process, a person, or historical events, we can sometimes struggle to show the progression of events in a way that is meaningful to the listeners. But not David Christian.
You have to survey the whole history of the universe. So let's do it.
In this video, we're going to break down how you can use these 5 strategies to take any idea for a chronological or time-based speech and go from a broad topic to a finely crafted speech that will be both enjoyable and meaningful for your listeners. The first and most important strategy is to determine a through line. This is a common element or theme that unites the various parts of your speech. The through line could be the genre for a series of writers, the development of cameras over the past couple centuries, the development of canvas art during the 18th and 19th centuries, the changing worldview of a prominent figure, the operational sequence for getting the space shuttle to the International Space Station and back again. Or it could be the entire history of the universe in 18 minutes. Listen to how David Christian characterizes the through line in his talk.
In a universe ruled by the second law of thermodynamics, how is it possible to generate the sort of complexity I've described, the sort of complexity represented by you and me and the convention center? And that's the story that we tell in Big History. But to do it, you have to do something that may at first sight seem completely impossible. You have to survey the whole history of the universe.
The task David Christian has set is to take the topic of the entire history of the universe from the Big Bang to the present day and challenge himself to tell it in under 18 minutes. So what are some of the through lines he could work with? He could choose to tell the history by looking at how the size of the universe went from unimaginably small to unimaginably large, or how its order went from messy to clumpy, or how its complexity went from low, almost everywhere, to high, almost nowhere. As we saw in the first clip of David Christian, he chose as his through line the increasing complexity that takes place in smaller and smaller parts of our universe. I think it also begs 2 questions that his talk has to answer. The first is, how do increasing levels of order and complexity happen in our universe? And the second is, how does that give rise to life, human civilization, and the technology we have nowadays? Now that you've determined the through line, you need to determine how many major points you want to make. In most speeches, there are typically 3 major points with supporting material, but sometimes it could be 2 and sometimes it could be 4. If you go beyond 4, you're really stretching the ability of your listeners to remember all the major points. Listen to how David Christian talks about segmenting 13.7 billion years into what he calls threshold moments.
Complexity builds stage by stage. Each stage is magical because it creates the impression of something utterly new, appearing almost out of nowhere in the universe. We refer in Big History to these moments as threshold moments.
So David Christian has chosen to divide his through line into segments where there is little change, but punctuated by threshold moments where conditions change that allow for complexity to increase rapidly. Having 7 points in his talk is a bit more than the average listener can easily remember, so David Christian divides them up into 4 categories: universe, earth, life, and humans. These categories now make it easier for the listeners to remember and enjoy the listening experience. Deliberate and strategic transitions and pauses give structure and breaks to what would otherwise be a steady stream or torrent of words. Since the listeners are listening and not reading, they can't go back and reread what they didn't understand. So we, as speakers, need to give them time to understand and signposts that indicate that we are moving on to the next point. A transition is like opening a door to a connecting room or area and then escorting the listener through. There are a variety of different types of pauses, but all of them give the listener time to think and feel. Listen to how effectively David Christian structures 2 of his transitions and how he incorporates pauses.
Let's begin by winding the timeline back 13.7 billion years to the beginning of time. Around us, there's nothing. There's not even time or space. Imagine the darkest, emptiest thing you can, and cube it a gazillion times, and that's where we are. And then suddenly, bam! A universe appears, an entire universe, and we've crossed our first threshold. Now, the going gets tougher. The next stage introduces entities that are significantly more fragile, significantly more vulnerable, but they're also much more creative and much more capable of generating further complexity. I'm talking, of course, about living organisms.
The effective use of graphics and props is one of the greatest gifts we can give our listeners. You may have heard the phrase, "show me, don't tell me." In public speaking, this is true both literally, as in showing, and literarily, as in describing. Imagine trying to describe this iconic picture. But if you show it to them and add a few words like, "This is the Earth rising in the sky as seen from the moon," all of a sudden there's a huge mental and emotional shift that takes place in the listeners, and you only had to add a few words to give the picture some context. Most pictures, graphics, and props can be understood in a few seconds. So take the time to see if you can replace a bunch of words with a graphic, picture, video, or other appropriate prop. In every TED Talk, the screen behind the speaker is a standard prop, and David Christian uses it to full effect. He uses it to display the egg video when he's talking about the arrow of time, and for global communications and other illustrative videos. And he pays particular attention to details like filling in the timeline graphic from right to left to emphasize that he is taking us back to the beginning of time. This one versatile graphic allows him to move along the timeline and zoom in or out as his narrative requires. There is one more non-standard TED prop that he uses. It's the auditorium lights. As he zooms in on the dot in 13.7, it is choreographed right down to the second with the lights going off for almost 24 seconds before the reverse happens on the screen and the lights come back on. Talk about giving the listeners an immersive experience. Informative speeches don't have to be boring. We can use our bodies, voices, and a range of technical tools to add emotional color that makes the listener experience even richer. We all have lots of body parts that can be used to express a wide range of emotions and sounds. We just need to explore and be creative. In his TED Talk, David Christian seldom stops moving. Whether he's winding time backwards or making an important point, you feel like he's enjoying sharing this with you and wants you to enjoy your learning experience. Our voice has many characteristics that help us express what we want to say. One of them is the rate at which we speak. We can convey a wide range of emotions and intentions just by varying the pace at which we speak. Here are two examples from David Christian's talk.
Now, the going gets tougher. The next stage introduces entities that are significantly more fragile, significantly more vulnerable, but they're also much more creative and much more capable of generating further complexity. A universe appears, an entire universe, and we've crossed our first threshold. The universe is tiny, it's smaller than an atom, it's incredibly hot, it contains everything that's in today's universe, so you can imagine it's busting and it's expanding.
At first, it may sound odd to design sounds into our speeches, but consider this. You do that every day to express a range of emotions or get a specific reaction. We clap, snap our fingers, bang our fist, or tap our foot when we want to add emphasis. Watch how David Christian uses finger snaps to add short, sharp sounds when he wants to emphasize the stars coming into existence.
There's a huge release of energy, and bam! We have our first stars. From about 200 million years after the Big Bang, stars begin to appear all through the universe, billions of them.
So far in this video, we've looked at the top 5 strategies for creating riveting chronological informative speeches. This video is just the first in a series of 6 videos that will look at all the major types of informative public speaking. To get notified when each of these videos is released, then click the subscribe button and the bell icon, and I'll see you in the next video.